Welcome to Our Social Impact, brought to you by the Prison Scholar Fund. The Prison Scholar Fund's mission is to provide education and employment assistance to help currently and formerly incarcerated people succeed and thrive in society while avoiding homelessness and the revolving door of reincarceration. The PSF also advocates for reform in correctional education to increase opportunity for all. As a nonprofit, we rely on investments, volunteers, and are always looking for board members to champion our mission. Please connect with us through our website at prisonscholars.org, where you can find volunteer opportunities, make a contribution, and learn about becoming a board member. You can also email us at info@prisonscholars.org and find us through most social media platforms at Prison Scholars. Become a patron by supporting us directly at Patreon with @Prison Scholars. We appreciate your review of this podcast through whatever platform you listen through. Without further ado, here's Dirk van Velzen, founder and CEO of the Prison Scholar Fund.
So welcome to Our Social Impact. Today we have Quintin Williams.
I work for Heartland Alliance. I'm a campaign manager here at Heartland Alliance, in our research and policy division.
So tell me all about that and how you ended up here.
Wow, how I ended up here, that's a long story. But so I'm also a PhD candidate right now in the Department of Sociology at Loyola University Chicago. And I, when in the summer months, I would find somewhere to work because my fellowship was only for 9 months. So it just came across my email, Heartland Alliance. I had already been doing some organizing work and policy work, and I love research, obviously, because nobody does a PhD without loving that. And it came across my email like, hey, research and policy, here's what we're looking for. And I came here and I actually started as an intern about 4 or 5 years ago. I don't even remember how long I've been here. But I started off as an intern on the Social Impact Research Center team, and I just never left since then. So I went from an intern to a fellow to field building project manager to now a campaign manager for a campaign that I'll tell you all about.
Interesting. So usually a PhD means you want to teach. So is that your end goal, or you just want to hit the pinnacle of education?
No. I love teaching. In fact, me coming here was like evidence that I did not want to be a tenure track professor, right? Because I didn't know at the time how you can use research to really impact things that are happening in society, in community. So when I got here at Heartland, I saw research being used for a different purpose, right? Like, so in academia, no shade to academia. I mean, I write journal articles and things like that periodically, but that's not all I want to do. I want my research to actually inform services that people receive in communities, or actually detangle some of the issues that some of our communities face. So the answer to that is no, I do not want to be a tenure track professor. However, though, I do love teaching, so I think I'll always get my teaching fix somehow, some way, at least part-time. I'm not teaching now because I'm currently writing a dissertation, so I don't have time for it.
Yeah. So what did you publish? And do you enjoy publishing?
I do. So I've published 2 articles. One article that I published, the first one that I published with Jill Fisher, who's at the University of North Carolina. We published an article about phase 1 clinical trials. Actually, sounds weird, but
sounds clinical.
Yeah, but the reason why I jumped on that project was because because I was a research assistant for her, and she was doing these qualitative interviews, and in them, people described the conditions of the clinic like prison, and I was like, wow. So they were
sounds familiar.
Exactly. So they were comparing it to prison. So we ended up writing an article discussing, because phase 1 clinical trials are supposedly voluntary, right?
Oh, yeah, clinical trials about what was a subject?
Yeah, well, so phase 1 clinical trials, number one, you have to be a healthy volunteer, right? So you can't have diabetes or something like that, or any other chronic illness. And they test, this is the first phase, the first people who test it, these are the folks, right? So it's really quite risky, right? However, here's the catch. They pay very well. So guess who's often taking advantage of it? People who are poor, formerly incarcerated folks, because they don't do background checks, right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so a lot of people who then, enroll in these clinical trials describe the conditions in the clinic as prison. So we found that very interesting. So we ended up writing an article called Captive to the Clinic, and I can send that to you, and send it out to your network. It's really interesting. And then the one that I just got accepted for publication. I actually put it on the formerly incarcerated graduates network, so go check that out. It's about the burden of post-incarceration life. So the title of the article is called "What's After Good." The premise of the article, you probably know a lot of people that have come home from prison that are doing pretty well, like in terms of like all the outward markers of success, like a job, maybe a place to live, and they volunteer at a church or something like that. So what me and my co-author found in the work that we did was that even when people sort of the barriers, so we try to push the field like beyond just the barriers framework and sort of switch it to a burden framework, because the barrier framework assumes that once the barriers are removed, that the burden is gone of being a formerly incarcerated person. And we found through our work that even when people had employment, even when they had all these things, they still had to deal with this underlying permanent status of a formerly incarcerated person that just made life difficult for them. So,
and how would that manifest? Like if all the barriers are down?
Perfect. Look, you giving this. That's a layup, man. Like that's the article about. That's what the article's about. So it manifested that we seen, and it probably manifested in more ways, but it manifested in three ways in our work. So it was judgment, right? It manifested just in constant judgment. For example, one of the anecdotes that we bring up in the article is that this gentleman, this is a pseudonym, Jose, right? He's in the community, he's doing community work, and he is working with kids who are, in gangs and things like that. And they knew his past. He's doing all this work like for the community, but he talked to us about how even folks in the community still looked at him, even when he was with the kids, they were still looking at him like, oh, I thought you changed your life. Why are you hanging with gangbangers? Are you still a gangbanger? So
no kidding. Huh.
This persistence of judgment still remain, and we have many more examples in the article. The other one is exploitation, right? So, and you can probably relate to this, right? Formerly incarcerated people always being asked to do shit for free, right? And coming to volunteer, right? Because we are so often, especially when we first get out, we're just bogged down with this desire to let people know that we are not what we used to be. So we do all kinds of things like community organizing, volunteering, and people take advantage of that. But another manifestation of that is just housing. Like, so people are desperate for housing, so they're putting in these rental applications, and folks know, landlords know that they're not going to house them, but they take the rental application fee.
They take the $75 fee or whatever.
Yeah, they keep taking it, right? So,
like in Seattle, we have the ban the box for housing. Do you not have that in Chicago?
No. Not really.
Not yet.
But we just passed here just housing amendment, but there's still a fight going on around that because, again, it's a big fight, man. Like seeing formerly incarcerated people as risk that just really never changes, unfortunately. But because we got to do some more work sort of on a cultural side, like we can change laws and things like that, but we need some narrative change about this distinction between good people and bad people. And then the last thing in the article that we point out was these competing demands, right? So you got your probation officer, you got your, your job, you're trying to volunteer at 3 different places, and this manifests even differently for women too. We found out because my co-author, she interviewed mostly women, so it was really interesting to see all the competing demands that women had, and particularly poor and black women, what they had to dealing with all these different systems, right? The Department of Child and Family Services, probation, recovery homes, and all that, like just all these competing demands where people that are formerly incarcerated, they feel like they have to be entangled in all of that in order to present their goodness to the world, right? But it's an increasing burden like on their back. So we have some suggestions on how to, get around it. At first, it's just acknowledging that is that when somebody has a job, yes, we should celebrate, but we should also, go a little bit further and talk about and push back against this permanent status that formerly incarcerated people endure long after they're gone and long after they've successfully so-called navigated reentry.
Interesting. So, you and I met at the Just Leadership
Sure.
USA Leadership Development Program.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear your journey there and also about Loyola. That's a great university. And
Yeah, it is.
what was your path there?
So I think my story starts on the west side of Chicago. That's where I'm from. That's where we at right now. We ain't on the west side right now. We downtown, right? We with the bougie people. But but so my journey started on the west side of Chicago, a neighborhood called Humboldt Park, and I was just like pretty much like any other kid. In fact, well, not really. I was a nerd, right? Like, so my neighborhood had all these things going on, gangs, drugs, violence, those types of things, but I was the kid who, got straight A's. So my mom still has a report card from, third grade with straight A's. I was winning spelling bees and all that shit, man.
You're that guy.
I am, like, and but I had a challenge, and my challenge was that, there was this voice in my head that was a whisper at first that it grew increasingly loud, and that voice was just saying, nobody cares. Nobody cares, right? And it just got louder. And what contributed to that voice saying that nobody cares was that, I had two parents who dealt with like substance use issues. And I don't know if you know anybody or yourself have, dealt with anybody with substance use issues, but the addiction becomes more important than anything, including the children sometimes. So that was one facet, but also I lived in a neighborhood that, didn't have a lot of resources in our school. Our books were, torn. We didn't have basketball uniforms, and then my community was police everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, so everything around me signaled to me that nobody cares, and then that created some dissonance in me because, like, I'm doing all this good stuff. I'm getting straight A's, I'm getting spelling bees, but yet still nobody cares. So when that voice got too loud to ignore, I was 15. And that's when I dropped out of high school at 15, sophomore year, even though I was on progress to even graduate early, right? Because, again, school has never been a problem for me. But I felt like at that moment, it was like, I'm a 15-year-old kid. Nobody cares. Well, fuck it, neither do I. So I just left school and then just hit the streets. And at the time, I didn't know it, but I became a statistic. Bruce Wester has a study that shows that in a cohort of black males who are born in a certain period of time who drop out of high school, 1 in 3 of them can expect to find themselves under correctional control, right? 1 in 3.
Now, Bruce Western, he's a professor from Harvard, right?
Correct. He's at Columbia now.
Oh, is he at Columbia now?
Well, I think he's still at Harvard, but I think he's like
he's just
temporarily at Columbia.
He's all over the place.
I became that statistic. So like 15. So when I dropped out, then as soon as I became in Illinois, like when you're 17, they can charge you as an adult. So as soon as I turned 17, I was on my way to, well, not long after I turned 17, I was on my way to a state penitentiary. And I'll never forget that, man. I was on my way down the bus. I had been in the county jail for like 6 months because I couldn't bond out. But like, I'm on the bus and this dude looks at me. He's like, "What are you doing on this bus? You don't even got no hair on your face." You know what I mean? And I was just like, because it was true. I was a baby. You know what I mean? Like, and I didn't even understand at the time what I had gotten myself into. So anyway, that was the first encounter with prison, and then that just led to multiple subsequent encounters, arrests, and then I had another.
And what were you doing at that point when you said you hit the streets? Are you selling drugs or
drugs? Everything.
Just gangbanging.
Drugs, gang affiliation. Just whatever, man. Like whatever it took to get accepted.
So it wasn't just one thing. You have a whole list of.
I got a whole list. No, it just wasn't one charge, right? Like I have some violent, so-called violent things in my background, and drugs, mostly drugs. And I think, that was just me trying to find something, right? Like I was just trying to find something to be, something to do, like something, an identity. And that's what I was looking for. And I found it to some degree out there because while my straight A's and all that stuff wasn't really being validated. When I got out in the street, and it was like the baddest shit you can do, like that shit got you pats on the back. And it was like, in fact, when I got out of prison the first time when I was 17, it was like I became like this legend within my circle, right? It's like, you've been to jail, and you made it out, and what's up, welcome home, right? You know what I mean? It's like all of that is playing into
because that's your reference group at this time.
Yeah, it was, man. And then, but my last incarceration, right, when I got 7 years for a drug case. I remember I had this moment. So that was my challenge. But then I came to, I was on my bunk at night, and feeling the comfy springs on my back, with the thin mattress, and smelling the sweet scent of 80+ men in the dorm room at night. And I was just staring at the ceiling, man, and I had this moment where I just was like, you know what? So that voice that was saying nobody cares, in that moment, I don't really know what happened. I was listening to something inspirational, I think, on my headphones.
Some Tony Robbins speech or something.
Man. It was some preacher or pastor or something. But like, I just made a decision right there. I chose to, like, if nobody else is going to care, I'm going to care. And I was like, I'm going to care even in here, because at that time I still had like another 1.5, 2 years to do inside. So I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do it like in here, but I was like, you know what, I'm gonna care about
you just hit that moment where like, fuck this, I'm changing.
I'm looking around, man, I gotta get the fuck out of here. How did I get here, right?
This is where I want to be.
Yeah, man. So I kid you not, though, the very next day, I get a letter from the institution saying that I have been approved for work release.
How about that?
The very fucking next day. Like, and it was a long shot, too, because I had a violent offense in my background, and then I had the worst type of drug felony that you can have, a Class X felony for which is the same like class as like murder and stuff like that for drugs, right? Which is crazy.
Is that like selling in a school zone, or what makes it so bad?
The amount.
Oh, a lot of stuff. Yeah.
So
you're pretty industrious out there.
Yeah.
That's why you're getting all the props.
Nah. But like, so yeah, man. So I took that as a sign. I'm like, oh shit, right? Like I made this choice last night, and then it's like now
someone heard you.
I can get for real. So I took that seriously. So it was a journey. But then, so when I got out, it's kind of like I picked up where I left off. I had ended up getting my GED like somewhere in my incarceration, but when I got out, I had a lot of support and help, and I went back to school, and then I went and got my associate's degree from a community college. And then I always had people at each stage encouraging me to go to the next stage. So the professors at the community college was like, yo, you should go to, transfer, get your bachelor's.
Now you have a different reference group, and you're still rocking the straight A's, I bet.
Rocking it, man. I'm killing it. All these kids, I tell people all the time, like I'm like mid-20s in college. All these kids are worried about what's going on in the dorm and shit. I've been to prison twice.
Yeah.
So my focus is a little bit different,
Isn't it funny, like after dealing with issues in prison, like nothing really, it's
like I'm like, yo, I could do this. This is easy, man. You know what I mean? Like it was so easy. So, I did that.
You found your spot.
I did, man. Got my bachelor's degree because that was always in me, though. I always was intrigued by the world, intrigued by books. I can sit and read every day, all day if I could. Malcolm X has this quote, like I forget how it goes, but it's something about he can get lost in books or something like that. I feel the same way. So then I got my master's degree. And then again, like I told you, next year.
Where's your master's from?
Loyola.
Also,
because I got accepted into the PhD program as with my BA. So you get the master's degree on the way to
on the track,
PhD. So and then in 2020, man, I'm gonna be like Dr. Williams. It's crazy.
How about that?
Think about. So that was my journey to Loyola. And then when I got to Loyola, one of the professors had reached out to me, who was on the application committee. He sends me this weird email, right? Because he kind of, anyway. But he sends me this weird email like, hey, I saw your application. We need to talk. And I'm like,
what does this mean?
I'm like, because I know I disclosed my criminal history. And,
is he trying to recruit you, or does he have bad news?
I don't know. Right. That's what I'm saying. So I get to his office, and he's like, it was a complete opposite, though. He was like, man, I saw your application, and I was like, we had to have you. He was like super, like telling me how he was advocating for me. And then what he did was he was like, I got some people in Chicago that you need to meet. And then that's what introduced me to the organizing and advocacy world about 6-7 years ago. That's how I met Marlon Chamberlain, the 2019 fellow. And I remember the first like community meeting I went to, they were talking about removing barriers to employment in schools for people with records, and they had like a printout of a section of the piece of legislation, and I remember it was like just this eye-opening moment for me when I looked, and I was like, wow, like this is actually on paper, like this thing that it's impacted my life. It's like I cannot work in a school, and it's right here on paper, legitimized, and this is bullshit. Like, so from that point on, like that was why.
You had something to bite your teeth into.
Yeah, man. I was like, oh man. So now I'm like a policy junkie because I'm like, yo, this is the type of thing that like, and I vowed to myself, I was like, I can't believe I didn't even know anything about this. I didn't know how laws and policies worked, and now, you know, I've really dedicated my life, you know, the remainder of my life to like really change some of those things that are on paper, man, that are hard to get rid of once they're in practice and in law. So now, you know, that's really what I'm doing now. That's where I'm at now. That's what I've been doing for the past, you know, 6-7 years, is really trying to remove those barriers that we face when we come out, because it's bullshit.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is that what you do at Heartland here?
Yeah. So now my roles have kind of shifted a little bit.
Yeah, maybe even talk a little bit about what Heartland does.
Heartland does a lot, man. I don't know if I can capture it like in one, but essentially there's a few companies. There's been around for over 100 years. One of the oldest nonprofits here in Chicago. Most of our work provides direct services to folks who are experiencing homelessness, people returning from incarceration, people who are chronically unemployed. We have housing, Heartland Health, Heartland Alliance International, Heartland Human Care Services.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah, so it's like it's a huge agency, but a human rights agency, right? And I think that was the framework that really got me excited about being a part of this organization, because I think at the core of the criminal justice reform movement is, I think that's what it's about, like this centering of humanity, of individuals who may have done things or may not have done things, but who have been cast in a certain light. And then, you know, other people and institutions have been given license to treat them as less than humans, you know. So part of my policy work and why I am striving so hard to get policies changed, because I feel like I really truly believe that policies speak. They speak to you. They say things to us. They communicate to us like who we are and what our value is. Like when a person with a record sees that he or she can't go volunteer in their child's school, like they can't be like go with them on a school trip because of, you know what I mean? Like that communicates
that
something
one marker
to you. Yeah, it says like, wow, I am not worthy enough to be here or something like that. So it's just like, yeah, so the underlying humanity is what I'm all about. So that's what I do now, man. And I think as the campaign manager, the position that I just stepped into, so over the past, since 2014, Heartland has been part of a coalition called the Rocky Coalition, RROCI, the Restoring Rights and Opportunities Coalition of Illinois. And we've been able to, through that coalition, pass each year since 2014 significant pieces of legislation that would remove some barriers to employment and housing for folks with records. And that, just to give a shout out to my partners, man, those agencies that we work with in collaboration with our Community Renewal Society, Cabrini Green Legal Aid, and Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, and it's made up of community organizers, policy folks, and directly impacted leaders from the community, right? And we make sure that we center their voices, so we don't even do a policy change without the input, and not even just input, like we won't do it. Like we hear from people, what are the barriers, what do you want, what do you need, and then we kind of craft something based off of that. So we've been winning every year, but like my colleague Melissa said, she said if we just go one by one every year, we'll all be dead before all the collateral consequences are gone, because we have in Illinois roughly about 1,500 collateral consequences across a bunch of different sectors. So we are now in the process of the campaign that I'm managing now. It doesn't have a name yet, coming soon, but what we're trying to do is build power, build coalition, and build a broad table both locally and nationally to really, here in the state of Illinois, take a big chunk out of the collateral consequences. So putting a bunch of bills in one, and it's not sort of like an omnibus legislation. So that's going to take a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of money, and we're just beginning that process now. So
you said you identified 1,400?
Yeah.
And then how do you triage it? How do you identify which ones to approach first? Sounds like, housing and jobs would be priorities.
We don't know yet. I mean, that's part of, we got some funds to do a year of planning. So part of this year of planning is to do that. So we'll be doing some extensive research in the Illinois code, to see what we're dealing with actually, and then I think we'll make the decision based off of that, but also in conjunction with what formerly incarcerated people in Illinois are facing. Because I do want to say another thing too, this is not just a Chicago thing, that formerly incarcerated people all across the state of Illinois. In fact, the latest numbers that we have, there's about 50% of Illinois residents have some type of criminal record. It's half.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Rather arrest or something.
Some kind of involvement.
Yeah. So that's half the population.
Half the state.
Right? So it's just it's just a no-brainer. So really thinking through, right, how to make this not just a Chicago thing, and then make this a statewide thing. So I think we have some great opportunities, though.
So you mentioned you got funding for this work. Who pays for this kind of?
I don't know. Can I say? No, we are one of the. It's public, so it's fine. One of the Art for Justice grantees from the Ford Foundation.
Cool. Are you the one that writes the grants, or is there a different team that does that and you just do the work?
Are you trying to get me to write some grants for you?
That would be nice.
No, I participated in the process. It was a collaborative process to really get it done. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about the collateral consequences. A lot of people, they have kind of a bias against prisoners, but I think some research came out of Berkeley where they figured out that 92% of Americans have all done something that would land them in prison.
Of course.
But they just haven't been caught, or they had, great legal representation.
Absolutely.
So when people think, prisoners are the other ones, most of Americans have done something. Yeah. But we just criminalize everything, and then when they finally get you, you end up in prison.
Yeah, no, I would love to get that study, man.
I'll forward it on.
Send it to me. I think that's part of the narrative change that we need to, because I think that's what it is, man. It's just if you can, the bad guys over there, as long as we have prisons and jails, we can always pretend like we're better than we actually are.
That's the other group.
Yeah.
The out group.
Yeah, we don't, that's what they do. That's what the bad people do, right? But, we're good. You know what I mean? It's just a way to make this, quite frankly, this bullshit dichotomy between good people and bad people, because there's no such thing.
Until they realize, hey, I was a club kid and I was doing some X one time, and that, you're a felon. You could have been.
Could have been. You get caught as possession, and maybe depending on where you were and who you were with, they could have enhanced it with all types of bullshit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'd love to see the data that you have too about the collateral consequences. I hear all sorts of. A lot of people are doing that work. Yeah. Trying to figure out.
We are trying to figure it out. I think it's really we need to put more force behind it, because I think we're doing a lot around sentencing, which is good. We're trying on the front end, trying to get people to, a lot on juvenile justice, right? Trying to prevent people from even going in the system, people who are already in the system, how, sentencing reform, get them out of there. But then also conditions of prisons, right? Trying to do things in that arena, and also with bail and bond reform. So, but I just think it's hard. Collateral consequences is going to be hard, because you have all these intersecting interests, right? You have business associations, you have realtors associations, you have, all these people with a lot of money, quite frankly, and pretty strong lobbies in each one of our states. That then, wield a great deal of power and influence over our elected officials. So we're going to have to contend with that. So,
all right.
Yeah.
So, of course, I met you at the Just Leadership thing. What was What was your path there? How did they scoop you up?
Good question. I ended up
and which cohort were you in?
the best cohort, 2018. It was really, I mean, it's, just look it up. You'll see the superstars.
Depends who you ask, I think.
Superstars, So I think I had met Glenn Martin like digitally, right? Like I hadn't met him in person yet, but we ended up doing like a webinar together about how to incorporate formerly incarcerated people in advocacy work. So we had
and Glenn Martin is the guy that started Jail USA.
He's the founder. Brilliant mind, brilliant man, just an incredible mind.
Is he out of New York or Chicago? I can't remember.
I believe he's in New York.
New York.
Yeah. So I met him, and then I had another one of my colleagues who is part of one of the organizations from the Rocky Coalition. She was a 2016 fellow. So,
not the best cohort?
Nah. She, it was
Save that for 2018?
It was cool, yeah, 2018, got it. But so yeah, she told me about it, and I met Glenn, and it just seemed right, man. I think I've never, ever seen any institution, quite frankly, give that much investment into formerly incarcerated people. I've never seen it in terms of money, resources, and then actual investment. I mean, like what formerly incarcerated people, get executive coaching, especially from David Mensa, right? Like nobody gets that.
That's pretty cool.
So yeah, that was my path. I applied, and I got in, and I was just excited, and it really has changed my life. And now I'm part of their train-the-trainer, so I'm being trained to train. Just finished the first year of that. That was pretty intense.
So you come back and be a coach, or just be a coach in your neighborhood?
Yeah, of course. I already do that, right? Like I already train. I already do trainings. I do trainings on, the isms, and I've done training on communication. I've done trainings on leadership development and things like that. So through the trainer program, I've been able to really hone in, my training and coaching skills, and look forward to continuing to put those into practice. But yeah, Just Leadership was life-changing for me. It still is. Like I'm still part of the network. So yeah.
Cool. So other than your PhD program, what else are you working on these days? What's next for you?
Oh gosh, what's next? I don't know. Like right now, my focus is certainly on the campaign that we're building. Like that is like top of mind. That is priority number one. Really laser focused on that. Writing a dissertation. My dissertation is examining the role of housing insecurity and reentry outcomes. So. Oh,
did you face challenges there? What was your housing situation like?
I got lucky, to be honest. Like I didn't go through, like I saw all like the management companies and stuff like that. I saw, the on the management companies applications, and
you see the box.
Just terrifying.
You know it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. So I just so happened one day, and I kid you not, I was walking down the street. This lady was walking her dog in a neighborhood that I wanted to live in, and I asked her, just randomly asked her, like, do you know of any, places for rent around here? Because I know sometimes the best places are not the ones that get advertised on like Zillow or something.
It's just a social networking it in.
Yeah. So and she says, and this is like the story of my life, man. She says, I'm a building manager for several properties. So I was like, oh,
nice to meet you.
Yeah. So we ended up forging a good relationship. She recently passed away. Rest in peace to her, because she was just such a understanding. So she knew my whole story, but she was so like the type of people that we need.
She viewed you as a person.
She did, and she took care of me. And when things got hard, like it was just a beautiful. So I got lucky, and I'm still in that neighborhood. It's still, she just passed away, so it's a new management company. So I'm gonna leave when my lease is up. But
have they changed the policy? Is it gonna be a different situation than you think?
I don't know.
Yeah,
that is to be determined. I don't know. So
it's interesting. Like, it sounds like you got lucky in a couple different spots, but lucky really has no, luck has no role in rehabilitation or opportunity.
Indeed.
Not for everybody.
It doesn't.
Not everyone can get lucky.
Nope. And that's why I tell my story in a way that does not make it seem like I'm just like Superman or something like that, because I'm not. Like, I'm a regular person that was fortunate and had a lot of support that a lot of people don't have. And what I want to see is everybody who's been impacted by incarceration to be able to experience all the things that I've experienced. And it's not because of like I'm some exceptional person. It's
just hit some good breaks.
I did. And some good people around me, for sure. The only thing that I'm working on now is just the PhD. I'm writing a dissertation on housing and reentry, the collateral consequences work, and that's the focus right now. So,
all right,
that's it.
Happy Monday, Quintin Williams. Thanks so much for joining us.
Of course. Have me back soon so I can curse some more.
Sounds good.
All right,
buddy.
Yeah.